Hello everybody, in this video I'm going to discuss how self-regulation and metacognition could be a rich strategy for us to explore to deepen student learning during remote learning. I'd like to start with what is known as a wrapper task, and this is going to involve you pressing pause and having a moment just to answer the questions on the screen. But essentially, self-regulation is about the extent to which learners are aware of their strengths and weaknesses, could be within a topic or with a set of ideas, and the strategies that they use to learn. So please press pause, have a read of the questions on the screen, and just have a think about what your answers might be. Okay. We'll come back to those. Obviously, a wrapper task tells us that we'll do it at the beginning and then at the end of this little video. But I wanted to start with this very helpful bit of compilation of information from the Education Endowment Foundation. I'll put a link to it at the bottom of this page too. So if you want to do some further reading, it's a very good place to start. But what it basically says is that for self-regulation and metacognition to have a big impact on student learning, teachers first of all need to be aware of it and understand its implications. We need to teach students strategies to allow them to take control of their own learning, and there's a large emphasis placed on us as teachers modelling our own thinking and decision making. We need to know the appropriate level and when to use it. There's a very simple rule. If the task is complex, then we need to keep metacognition out of the equation. You would do it before the students start the task and at the end, not during. You wouldn't want to overload them during that middle phase. We need to make this a normal part of our everyday teaching, so students have an opportunity to practice and learn how to do this independently, and that involves teaching how to organise your notes, how to manage your time, and make it really important for the students so they see it as a key part of their learning endeavours. And the final part is very much why we're making a video on this, is that this can't be an individual teacher's endeavour. It's got to be a school-wide one if we're going to have an impact with this enterprise. So it's just worth pointing out a few things, is that metacognition really is the fabric of successful learning. It's in the strategies that the students have, it's about their view of themselves and their own abilities, and therefore we know it will have a significant impact upon their academic performance. So as I've already said, we do need to know the metacognitive demands of a task, otherwise we will miss the opportunities to develop student skills. So right now I think it's important that we keep things nice and simple for our students, and focus on as few aspects of this as possible. Students will learn metacognitive skills as they grow older, so you'd expect a year 11 to be a much more sophisticated self-regulator than a year 7 student, although that's not always true, but that development doesn't happen spontaneously. So this is something that needs to be taught, and this is particularly important for our disadvantaged students because they are less likely to use them and have them develop to an ability where they can actually make an impact on their own learning. So this is a little bit of promise in this. This comes from Graham Nuttall, and this is his first premise about learning, and it says simply, students learn what they do. So given the students forget most of the content of their notes after the rote memorization and test, what they do in the classroom day after day is what they learn and become expert in. And for us as teachers, we tend to separate the management of classroom behaviour from the subject matter that we teach, but these things are not separated in the minds of students. So this is great news for us, because it means that if we give the students an opportunity to practice self-regulation and metacognition and teach them the strategies involved in that, they will get good at it. This is perhaps the most useful overview of self-regulated learning, which is made up of knowledge of strategy, so the cognition part, the awareness and the ability to change your choices and focuses during the learning process. So learning about the learning process is a key part to metacognition, and those very human feelings of motivation, how you can control your focus and attention. So the cognition part is made up of basic learning strategies that we would need to teach students. It could be as simple as teaching the students how to organize their notes, or teaching them a technique of something like concept mapping. But for self-regulated learning to help students learning more holistically, we need to go beyond just teaching them the technique of, say, concept mapping. We need to teach them when you would need to concept map. When's concept mapping going to be a really useful strategy for you to use? How do you go about making the connections in the concept map? So this is part of what we have to teach, and the best way to do that is through teacher modeling. So it's about making them aware of our thoughts and our choices and our decisions and why we have made them. The same is true for the problem solving strategies. So these could be as simple as how do you break down a complicated maths problem, or how do you structure a paragraph of writing in science to make a clear and concise conclusion. And also the critical thinking strategies is a whole host of different strategies that help students think about the process that they went through, the technique that they've used, and how that relates to the content. Have they been successful? And that new bit of content, how does it connect to other things that they know? What's the importance in that bit of content? And we can train students to do those processes, those thinking processes, more independently. To do that, we do need to be tapping into the metacognitive part of this. So this is about students becoming increasingly aware of when and how to apply those techniques. It's also part of how we regulate learning. So if you think about learning as a linear process, just for simplicity's sake, before we begin learning something, there has to be some decision made about how you're going to go about doing that. So there's a part of planning in this. Once you're into the process of learning, the things that we would want to be monitoring and checking is, am I understanding the content? Does it make sense to me? Have I got any questions? Is the technique I've chosen working for this particular content? Do I need to do something different? And at the end of that process, when the task is finished, do they know it? Do they need to do anything extra? The technique that they've chosen, how would they apply it to somewhere else? Where else might it be useful? Motivation is, in this model, is very much about internal rather than external motivation. And it's really about students' beliefs in themselves. How good are they at learning material? What are they good at? What are they capable of? The key to this is that this is something that we can teach and improve through our attitudes, and by modeling those processes, students can see successful people at work. So we can really affect students' belief in themselves. The other thing seems a little bit more esoteric, and it's about what do they believe about knowledge and learning itself. And this is, students need to believe to be successful that everything is learnable, and again, that's something that we as professionals can model. So I think the first step with this is about raising awareness. And obviously, I think it's hard to unpick this from the cognitive strategy you choose to teach your students. But I think part of it is about making the students aware. So it could be, what do they need to be aware of? It could be, well, what type of task are we doing and why would we do that? It could be, what do you already know and how does it fit into this? It could be making them aware of their confidence or their motivation and how you go about changing that. So we've got choices to make when we are trying to raise student awareness of their choices and metacognition and motivation. And I think it is best served if we keep some of those parameters solely under our control as teachers, so students aren't overwhelmed by too many choices to make at any one point in time. So this is key. This is the planning, monitoring and evaluation cycle of metacognition, and runs parallel with the process of learning. So let's look at these stages in turn. So planning, this might include previewing the information that's coming up or what tasks they're going to be using. It could be about breaking complex tasks down into more manageable chunks. It could be developing a timeline of what a task might look like and how long each section might take with students. So again, there's a lot of options here. So I think we just need to be very selective with what we ask students to do, but just some possible prompts for students to use before they start a task. And I'm hoping you'll spot on that this is very similar in terms of the phrasing that I used in the wrap activity at the beginning. So it could be, what do you already know about this subject? It could be about what is interesting about that subject or why they think this particular idea is important before they start learning about it. It could be about what success might look like. It might be, well, we're looking at this idea, but what topic have you been studying? How does it fit in before they actually get involved in it? So a selection of one or two of those questions might get the students to become more aware of what the task is and how to do it well, and then to start making some choices based upon that. The second part is the self-monitoring part, and that is the student checking against the determined plan, where they're headed. Are they getting along as expected? Do they understand things? Are they maintaining their interest and engagement in the idea? Is there a need to change the strategy that they're using? Is there something that they're simply not getting and what the gap is? Do they need to go back and teach themselves something again? So again, a selection of prompts could be used at this point, although I'm just going to emphasize that I feel during remote learning, preloading it and then evaluating at the end will have a big impact for our students. But again, during the task, the students could be just doing the simple monitoring. So this is about asking themselves questions like, are you getting this? I've chosen to do it this way. Is it working? Am I learning it? Am I working hard enough? Am I going to finish the deadline? And then the second part of this is actually the control and taking some action into their hands. So allowing them to ask a question or to make a link or to refocus their attention on the important ideas, or when to seek help, is all part of that process of monitoring and then doing something about it. So this could be built into a task. So this is simply from a Microsoft form. So it could be a question about the content, and if they get it right, they get a tick to say that they're right. But if they've missed picked an answer which is right but has got a detail missing, they've fallen into a bit of a trap. You can then point out that they've missed something out and then direct them back to it. If they've done something incorrect, you could put in a metacognitive prompt and ask the student to consider the strategy that they're using. Has it been successful? Or to go back to their notes before answering another question. So we can build in within our feedback in Microsoft Forms, feedback that would guide the students through some of that thinking. Final part is on the evaluation. So this is about the content. Did they understand the content? But it's also about understanding what the strategy does, and has it been successful for them, and has it been successful for that particular part of the content you've taught. This would also allow them to make decisions about what to do next time. So you could say, oh, next lesson we're going to do something very similar. The idea is just building on this. What strategy would you use? Would you use the same strategy? And so on and so forth. But it is that mix of content and metacognitive skills and awareness is that we're seeking to build upon. So again, there's lots of options here for asking questions, and we just need to be selective at each point, but asking the students about, what do you now know that you didn't know already? How did your motivation change during that activity? How did you overcome any difficulties during that time? Did you think you asked enough questions, or have you asked enough help during learning that particular topic? Things that is going to get them to reflect on the learning and the process of learning. So these could be a little bit more content focused, so it could simply be some comprehension questions, or questions to help them connect to other parts of the curriculum. It could be more strategic ones in terms of the quality of their work or their organisation, and they could be reflective in terms of helping them improve going forward. So, before we conclude this session, I just wanted to highlight the structure of the metacognitive wrapper. The wrapper task starts at the beginning, before the students would begin their lesson, and then would conclude the lesson with some reflective or evaluative questions. So I would normally give a little bit of extra information, more than the title of the lesson, just to highlight, just so the students have got something more to base their ideas on in the questions. So I've given the definition of what self-regulation and metacognitive is for us, and then the prompts to get them thinking and raise awareness of regulation and metacognition should include several, if not all, of these type of prompts. So there should be something that's going to lead them to self-question and self-evaluate about the content before the goal is actually set. They need to have a prompt that is about strategy, so whether it's a task related bit of information or thinking or planning, or content related, something that might be highlighting something that they already know that is useful. There need to be a little bit about self-management and choice and strategy, about how they might go about learning something, and there has to be something that is going to have a focus on learner attributes that's effective. So the example for that one there is obviously the motivation one. How motivated are you feeling today? I tend to use that one quite a lot, because I know it has a big effect on the people that genuinely engage with it. I remember running a session a long time ago with some NQT +2 teachers, and I asked them at the beginning of the session, beginning at 4 o'clock, said how motivated you are, and one of them, the busy young teachers, had the session lasted an hour, got to 5 o'clock, and then we concluded it with the metacognitive wrapper again. And this one teacher very honestly said, look, I arrived at 4 o'clock, I was just interested in going and having a cup of coffee and doing some marking, but the fact that you asked me that question made motivation a really important part for me, and that actually changed how I was feeling in light of just thinking about, actually, this is important, and found importance within the session. So those things can have a big impact, even when they're simply stated. So, final part, and these are the questions that are on the Microsoft form for you to complete. This is the wrapper task. conclusion, and you'll see that it's very similar questions that I'd asked at the beginning. I've just rephrased them somewhat and made them more in line with those 4 prompts. Okay, so take a moment and just answer the questions. What do you now think you will have to do to make students aware of metacognition and self-regulation that fits with your subject? What might be key strategies for students in your subject? How important is self-regulation and metacognition in your classroom or in remote learning or in your subject? And how's your motivation been over the last 18, 19 minutes or so? Did it start high and has it subsided? Are you more interested now, and has your motivation grown as you've learned more? Okay folks, thanks for listening, take care.